We light this chalice in the search for truth, in worship and fellowship. Fellowship sign. As an extension of lighting our chalice, I want to take a moment of silence to light 3 candles for some of the names who have been affected by police brutality. We cannot cover all of the names, of course, but we light a candle for the life of Sonia Massey, for the life of Jillian Sykes, and for the life of Samuel Brown. May these lights be a symbol of our commitment to continue the work of racial justice and to proclaim that Black lives matter. In addition, we are lighting a 4th candle to recognize the impact of war on so many innocent people. May we find a way to live in peace.
Please turn in your gray hymnal to number 347 and stand and sing along.
Gather the Spirit, harvest the power. Our separate choirs will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery at this hour. Our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather and peace, gather and thanks, gather and sympathy now and then, gathered in hope, compassion and strength, gathered to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind, seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather and peace, gather and thanks, gather and sympathy now
And now we have time for all ages with Bambi Galore.
Someone had put the short step under here, and I don't need that step, so I just pushed that in. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This is the time when normally those who are usually about the teen and under, we ask them to come up. But as we seem to be a congregation of mostly tweens and uppers, I would ask for you to send your inner child down to the front right now and just let your inner child out, love it. Let them come to the front and enjoy this story from Frog and Toad Together by Arnold Lobel. We will be reading the story Dragons and Giants. Frog and Toad were reading a book together. The people in this book are brave, said Toad. They fight dragons and giants, and they are never afraid. I wonder if we're brave, said Frog. Frog and Toad looked into the mirror. We look brave, said Frog. Yes, but are we, asked Toad. Frog and Toad went outside. We can try to climb this mountain, said Frog. That should tell us if we are brave. Frog went leaping over rocks, and Toad came puffing up behind him. They came to a dark cave. A big snake came out of the cave. Hello, Lunch, said the snake. When he saw Frog and Toad, he opened his wide mouth. Frog and Toad jumped away. Toad was shaking. I am not afraid, he cried. They climbed higher, and they heard a loud noise. Many large stones were rolling down the mountain. It's an avalanche, cried Toad. Frog and Toad jumped away. Frog was trembling. I am not afraid, he shouted. They came back to the top of the mountain. The shadow of a hawk fell over them. Frog and Toad jumped under a rock. The hawk flew away. We are not afraid, screamed Frog and Toad at the same time. Then they ran down the mountain very fast. They ran past the place where they saw the avalanche. They ran past the place where they saw the snake. They ran all the way to Toad's house. Frog, I am glad to have a brave friend like you, said Toad. He jumped into the bed and pulled the covers over his head. And I am happy to know a brave person like you, Toad, said Frog. He jumped into the closet and shut the door. Toad stayed in the bed, and Frog stayed in the closet. They stayed there for a long time, just feeling very brave together. Now, I know it's much easier when we do actually have the tweens and unders for them to interject and yell things out, so I will not ask that of you, but I will ask you to think, when have you had to tell yourself, I am not afraid? When have you had to stand up even when you were trembling and shout out, I am not afraid? Because everyone can be brave and afraid at the same time.
Now is the time in our service for sharing our joys and sorrows. We come together in community to share with one another, to support one another, and to celebrate with one another. We bear sacred witness to each other in this honored ritual. For some of us here today, this has been a week of life-changing joy that needs to be lifted up in this worship. Now is the time in our service where we take an offering. We know it's the gifts of all of us that help us to help support our ability to thrive and gather. For those attending in person, we will pass the collection plate. Please use the envelope you'll find in the pew, write your name, and indicate if your offering is part of your pledge or if it's a donation. For those online, links and instructions will be posted in the chat. You can mail us a check or donate through the PayPal giving page on our website. Please give as generously as you can. Our offerings will be gratefully received.
We've cleared off the table, leftovers saved, washed the dishes and put them away. I've told you a story, tucked you in tight at the end of your knockabout day.
As the moon sets its seeds to carry to sleep over the midnight sea, I will sing you a song no one sung to me. May it keep you good company. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one. And the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're gone.
There are girls who grow up strong and bold. There are boys quiet and kind. Some race on ahead, some follow behind. Some go in their own way and time.
Some women love women, some men love men, some raise children, some never do. You can dream all the day, never reaching the end of everything possible. Be you.
Don't be rattled by names, by taunts, by games, but seek out spirits true. If you give your friends best part of yourself, they'll give the same back to you. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one. And the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done.
Now, please turn in your teal hymnal, number 1053. How could anyone? Please rise. How
Could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could
Hello, and thank you for allowing me to be here at the start of this month. June is an interesting month to fill in the church calendar. It's a month in which, if as a preacher you're in any doubt on what subject to speak on, you can always turn to the most ubiquitous, colorful, and vibrant theme there is, pride. But if you've never given a sermon before, let me let you in on a little behind-the-scenes secret. The amazing, hard-working people who put together the services, the organizers, the music directors, the administrators, they like to know what you're going to preach on about a good week or two in advance. Now, I don't know about you, but in this fast-paced, heavy, complicated world we live in today, it's hard enough to know what you're going to say one day ahead of time, let alone 2 weeks. So in Trust for a title, I chose a fairly ambiguous one, Pride, Where You Are. Like, what does that even mean? And for those of you following along closely, what happened to the reading today? Well, we had a time for all ages, and that was the reading, the story Dragons and Giants from Arnold Lobel's 1972 masterpiece, Frog and Toad Together. I chose this because as a queer parent navigating the currents of our modern world, I deeply resonate with Frog and Toad. In the story we just shared, both characters are moving through a world that is suddenly full of massive obstacles, unexpected terrors, and predatory shadows. Things that are entirely reasonable for a frog and a toad to be terrified of. And in the way that Arnold Lobel writes them, we are not spared their fear. They do not wear capes. They don't possess magical powers. While they scream out into the void, we are not afraid and we are brave, their bodies tell us opposite. They are terrified. Yet, they persevere. They continue on their journey, running from the hawk, the snake, and the avalanche, all the way until their path leads them right back home. Todd hops into his bed and pulls the covers over his head. Frog hides in the dark closet. And Lobel ends the story by telling us that they stayed there for a long time, just feeling brave together. They are still brave even when they are hiding under the covers. They are still brave even when they acknowledge that the outside world is a dark, overwhelming, and scary place. This is a story for everyone. It's a story of two friends making it through, figuring out how to survive and being brave, even from inside the closet. Now, on the surface, this makes for an incredibly simple and perhaps even cliched allegory. Being brave while in the closet. It sounds like a pretty predictable, neatly packaged sermon that one could dream up during Pride. But that's not actually why I chose this story. I chose it because of the history of the man who wrote these characters into life, Arnold Lobel. To understand the way of Frog and Toad, we have to understand a little bit more about their creator. Arnold Lobel was born in Los Angeles in 1933, but raised in Schenectady, New York by his grandparents. His childhood was not an easy one, filled with illness and bullying, and so he found that by turning to drawing and storytelling, it gave him the tools he needed to connect with his peers, which then led him to move to New York City and attend the Pratt Institute for Illustration. There he met a fellow art student who he would marry, Anita. They lived in Brooklyn and raised two children, Adrian and Adam. For all intents and purposes, Arnold Lobel was living the mid-century American dream. Lobel became most famously known, of course, for these two amphibious characters. The first book, Frog and Toad Are Friends, was published in 1970, and the second, Frog and Toad Together, which we read from today, followed in 1972. It's not surprising that these stories have held up for generations. They're not flashy. They don't rely on pop culture references or shock value. They are filled instead with quiet, radical compassion and the deep adventure found in the utterly mundane routines of life. Eating cookies, raking leaves, waiting for the mail, and taking walks. All the things we desperately want to do when we are with our best friends. But let's look a little bit closer into Lobel's life. It was in 1974, just 2 years after Frog and Toad Together was published, that Lobel took a brave and monumental step. At 41 years old, in an era when homosexuality was still widely classified as a mental illness and a moral failing, Arnold Lobel came out to his family. He sat down with his wife and his children and told them the truth. He was a gay man. Arnold never made mention of his sexuality publicly. He never marched in the liberation parades of the 1970s. He didn't write a manifesto. But his daughter, Adrienne Lobel, has gone on record several times stating a truth that unlocks the entire canon of his work. Frog and Toad were the beginning of his coming out story. Frog and Toad are tales of two same-sex creatures living mundane lives with each other, where the simple excitement of just being able to be together is enough. When we think of LGBTQ plus literature, we often focus on the grand, dramatic, and revolutionary. We look at the fiery proses of James Baldwin, the radical poetry of Audre Lorde, or the tongue-in-cheek plays of Oscar Wilde. We look for the political statements, the defiance, and the overt declarations of identity. But there is another side to queer representation, one that is quieter, but is no less revolutionary. The literature of survival through domestic peace. Think about what Frog and Toad actually represent. These are two male characters who are entirely devoted to each other. They do not have wives, they do not have traditional nuclear families. Their emotional universes revolve entirely around each other's well-being. When Toad is sad because he has never received a letter, which, spoiler alert, if you haven't read Frog and Toad, spoiling one of the stories for you, sorry. When Toad is sad that he has not received a letter, Frog doesn't tell him to man up. Frog goes home, writes him a beautiful letter, and hires a snail to deliver it, sitting with Toad for days in mutual patience, waiting just to see him smile. Yet Lobel doesn't make these characters perfect, flawless paragons of virtue. They are highly flawed. In fact, it's often a common misconception that Frog and Toad is on the banned book list because of Arnold Lobel's homosexuality, but in reality, it's been put on banned book lists because they believe it promotes laziness. So just a fun fact to throw in there. Anyways, they don't always understand each other. Toad is anxious, self-conscious, deeply insecure, and prone to dramatic bouts of laziness and depression. Frog is more patient, adventurous, and grounded. But he too gets tired, and he too occasionally needs space. They feel lazy, they overeat cookies, they lose buttons, and they have to literally and metaphorically pick each other up when they are low. They care for each other through the friction of their differences. These were the exact things that Arnold Lobel longed for in his own life. A committed domestic same-sex partnership where he could be fully known, flaws and all, and still be deeply loved. These were the things he could not say with his voice in 1970, not yet. But the fact that he had to cloak this longing in the guise of a green frog and a brown toad didn't mean he wasn't brave, nor does it mean he should not have been incredibly proud of who he was. In queer theory, there's a concept known as queer coding, the practice of writing characters with traits that communicate their identity to those in the know, even if it's never explicitly stated. Frog and Toad are perhaps the most successful and universally loved examples of queer coding. Children read them and see a story of friendship. Queer people read them and see a story of chosen family. It is a literature of quiet resistance in a world that told gay men they were predatory, isolated, and doomed to misery. Lobel created a world where two male-coded characters were gentle, domestic, kind, and profoundly safe together. This brings us squarely back to our text today, Dragons and Giants. When we read this story through the lens of Lobel's life, it transforms from a cute children's fable into a deeply moving psychological map of the closet and the hostile world outside of it. Let's see how the story unfolds. Frog and Toad look into a book of fairy tales and see heroes fighting monsters. They decide they want to find out if they are brave, and so they leave the comfortable domestic valley and climb a mountain. The moment they step outside their routine, though, the world notices. The world becomes hostile. First, a massive snake appears, opening its jaws, showing its teeth, and trying to eat them. What is their immediate reaction? They do not fight it. They leap away, terrified, but not without yelling, "I'm not afraid." Next, they climb higher, and the earth itself shakes. An avalanche of rocks comes crashing down upon them, yet they are forced to sprint all the way down the mountain, away from the mountain, yelling, "I am not afraid." And finally, a hawk swoops down, flying right at them, casting a mass of shadows and screams. They flee right back to where they came from, right into Toad's house, all the while screaming, "We are not afraid." Frog and Toad are trying to achieve a standard of bravery defined by the outside world. The bravery of dragons and giants, the bravery of knights and conquerors. But every time they face the hostile forces of the world, forces that represent societal judgment, violence, and the crushing weight of exposure, they survive not by fighting, but by seeking shelter. They survive by hiding. They survive by retreating to spaces where the world cannot see them. And where does the story end? It doesn't end with them standing victoriously on top of the peak, waving a flag. It ends with Toad jumping into his bed, pulling the blankets over his head, and Frog jumping into the darkness of the closet. In our culture, we have built a very specific narrative around what it means to be a queer person. We are told you must be out, loud, proud, and visible. We celebrate the coming out story as the ultimate goal. We look at the closet as a place of pure shame, cowardice, and darkness. But Arnold Lobel gives us a different theology of safety. When Frog is in the closet and Toad is under those covers, they are not filled with shame. They have just run a gauntlet of survival. They have looked into the eyes of a world that wanted to consume them, and they made it back to their sanctuary alive. Lobel writes, Toad stayed in bed and Frog stayed in the closet for a long time. They stayed in there for a long time, just feeling brave together. This is the queer allegory of Dragons and Giants. It asserts that hiding is not always cowardice. Sometimes hiding is the only way a vulnerable creature can preserve its life. Sometimes the closet is a fortress. Sometimes pulling the covers over your head is an act of radical self-preservation. And doing so doesn't mean you aren't brave. It means you are surviving so that you can live another day. Out of all the stories of Frog and Toad, I did choose this one for a very specific reason. We are living in a moment where the concept of pride is heavily commercialized, heavily scrutinized, and quite frankly, increasingly dangerous for many people. In our world right now, we need to be reminded of our history. We need to remember that the very first Pride wasn't a corporate-sponsored parade with rainbow floats. The first Pride was born out of a riot at the Stonewall Inn in 1969, led largely by trans women of color, drag performers, and street youth who were tired of being brutalized by the state. It was an act of explosive public defiance. We need that explosive defiance. We need the people who stand on the front lines, who march, who sue, who speak loudly into microphones, and who refuse to be hidden. Yet, at the exact same time, we must remember that it still takes time for the individual people to come out. It takes an immense amount of safety to stand tall, to be visible, and to be public. And in a culture that only validates the loud and the visible, is a culture that leaves behind the most vulnerable among us. As a queer person navigating our current world, I have to make conscious daily decisions on how I am perceived. I have to read the room, read the neighborhood, and read the political climate. While I deeply hope that I am perceived as authentically queer no matter what context I walk into, I also know right now that my non-binary identity is a bit more under the covers than it used to be. There are places where I choose to blend in, spaces where I choose not to correct someone's pronoun use, and spaces where I opt for discretion over disruption. Does that mean I am a coward? Does that mean I am failing my community? No. It means that I am bravely living my life every single day. It means I am taking care of myself, my mental health, and my family in the exact way that I feel I need to under our current societal structure. And so I want to say this clearly to anyone listening today. Pride is going to look radically different for many of us, and that is exactly how it should be. No one is right or wrong for how they choose to navigate their safety or celebrate their truth, especially right now. In a world that is actively trying to legislate queer people out of existence, a world that is banning books, rolling back healthcare, and ratcheting up hostile rhetoric, it is an act of monumental bravery just to exist. If all you did this week was wake up, take a breath, and keep your heart beating inside a world that it feels heavy, that is enough. That is an achievement, and that is something to be profoundly proud of. Life is a story. Life is a journey. Life is a highway. Life is so many exhausting cliches, and yet it remains a uniquely, fiercely individual experience at the exact same time. None of us can truly know what we would do if we were standing in someone else's shoes. None of us knows the hidden dangers, the family dynamics, the workplace vulnerabilities, or the internal traumas that someone else is carrying. And yet, right now, our culture makes it incredibly easy to pass quick, harsh, sanctimonious judgment on one another without ever looking at the context of a person's life. We look at someone who doesn't come to the march and we assume they don't care. But there are deeply valid reasons why people may not feel safe going to massive public pride events right now. They are completely within their right for that, and they are brave for honoring their boundaries. There are those who may represent themselves in a particular way as to be seen as more homogenous, more traditional, or more compliant with the larger straight society, just to keep their jobs or keep their housing. They are brave for doing what it takes to survive. And there are those who have been scared back further into the closet by what they see going on in the news today. They have pulled the covers back over their heads because the avalanche of the mountain is too loud right now. They too are brave because their journey is their own. Their timeline is holy, and their boundaries should be honored. If you look up the official obituary of Arnold Lobel, you will see a very specific and sanitized narrative. You'll read his incredible achievements and his contributions to literature. You will see references to his ex-wife and his 2 children. And you will read that he died at the age of 54 in New York City of cardiac arrest. But as we all know too well in the queer community, that obituary does not tell Arnold's full story. For you see, this was New York City in 1987. Arnold Lobel had been living openly as a gay man for over a decade. He had been living a vibrant, authentic life in the heart of the West Village. He had a committed, loving, long-term partner named Howard Weiner. And the cardiac arrest that took his life at the age of 54 was not a random medical anomaly. It was brought on by complications from AIDS. Arnold Lobel was one of an entire generation of irreplaceable queer creators whose journeys were cut short due to a horrific disease. A disease that was willfully ignored, laughed at, and overlooked by the highest levels of government and media because the people contracting it were othered, because they were seen as disposable. When I remember this history, I am left with a profound, aching sense of grief. I am left to wonder with what other adventures Frog and Toad would have gone on if Arnold had lived into the 90s or 2000s. I wonder if Frog and Toad would have ever officially moved into the same house. I wonder if they would have grown old together, rocking on the porch, just watching the leaves fall. Or maybe they would have just stayed just friends. living in their separate adjoining homes. But regardless of what stories were left unwritten, Lobel had already given us the blueprint of how to honor his legacy. He told us they stayed there for a long time, just feeling brave together. Arnold Lobel found a way to be brave in his truth, even when the world wasn't ready to hear it spoken plainly. He found a way to leave a breadcrumb trail of love, safety, and domestic peace for generations of queer children and parents who would come after him. He managed to create a monument to same-sex devotion that sits on the shelves of almost every public library and elementary school in the world, completely undetected by the forces of bigotry. That is a miracle. That is the triumph of art over oppression. So as we enter this month of Pride, let us broaden our definition of what it means to be proud. Let us break down the rigid, judgmental binaries of visibility and invisibility. If you are someone who is standing on top of the mountain today, screaming your truth into the wind, waving a flag, and fighting the dragons and giants, thank you. We need your strength. We need your fire. You are brave. If you are someone sitting in the quiet valley today, baking cookies for the people you love, living a quiet, radical life of domestic peace with your chosen family, thank you. We need your tenderness. We need your stability. You are brave. And if you are someone who is currently hiding under the covers or sitting in the quiet, dark safety of the closet today, because the hawk is circling over the head and the avalanche is tumbling down the peak, hear me clearly. You are not a coward. You are taking care of yourself. You are preserving your precious holy spark of your life until the season is right. You are surviving, and you are brave. May you find pride wherever you are today on the magnificent, beautiful spectrum of human sexuality and gender identity. May you grant yourself and your neighbors the grace of context, and may you find a way in the quiet spaces of your life to find a friend, pull up the covers, and feel brave together. Blessed be.
Thank you so much, Bambi. That was wonderful. And now our closing hymn. Please join us in singing hymn 1014, Answering the Call of Love, in your teal hymnal.
Now, we've done a little editing on this. It's no longer standing on the side of love, it's answering the call. Because one person in our congregation cannot stand, so she took her editor's pen to that.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth of our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound. Corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands bound together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim, we are answering the call of love. Answering the call of love.
I invite you to join me in extinguishing the chalice, and you can find the affirmation in our order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. For these we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Closing words again by Craig Rowland. Let us be that circle. As we extinguish the flame, may we carry its warmth into the world, not as a memory, but as a promise that you deserve a place where your voice matters, where your laughter is treasured and your silence is honored. You deserve a circle that sees your scars and your strength, your doubts and your radiance, and holds them all with care. Let us be that circle for one another, a community of fierce welcome, wild grace, and radical hope. Go knowing you belong here. You always have. And now, our postlude. And so ends our service. So please join us for hospitality in the parish hall.